Hi, I'm Steve. Welcome to my shop. Today we're going to do part 2 of the review of the Triton Dual Dowel Joiner. If you watched part 1, you will see that this has been so far an exercise in frustration. And today we're going to do the test of joinery. And the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that this window, the lines here, are calibrated to the center of the bit pattern. If you don't do that, everything will be all whopper-jawed. And if you've ever worked with dowels before, they are not very forgiving. You have to be right on. You need to be normal to the surface that you're joining, and your placement has to be exact because there is no wiggle room. This is not like a biscuit joiner or even the domino where you can go to a wider setting and give you a little bit of adjustment. Once those dowel holes are drilled, they are where they are. You will not be able to move them. So let's get started. First thing I want to do is just mark a line. And it can be anywhere, just in case I need to move these things around. Let's just mark a line across both pieces. And these are going to be the center line for the center marking of the window. And what I'm going to do is just take this and I'm going to mill 2 holes here with this aligned in the center. And then I'm going to mill 2 holes on this side with the line aligned to the center marking. And I'm going to assemble this with some dowels and then see that these lines match up. If they don't match up perfectly, you're not going to be flush on the ends. So that's the first thing I'm going to check. These are 8 by 30 millimeters. And I like the fluted dowels, not the spiral cut ones. And let's just see how this goes together. Well, it looks like this is due for some calibration. Let me zoom in here so you can see a little better. You can see how far off those lines are. I don't know how successful this adjustment is going to be because these holes look like they were countersunk and not slotted. So it had that window scale had a tendency to want to go back to its original position. Let's see how successful I am. It's closer. You can obviously see there's an offset between the 2 lines, but because of the way those countersunk holes are, I don't think I can get it any better. Okay, I'm 0.01 millimeters there. So looks like I'm a 0.5 millimeter proud on this side, which looks about where the offset is there. The fence window markings are not all that accurate. So that's going to give me an offset at the edge, and I don't know that it's going to get any better there. So let's go ahead and try some sheet goods. Okay, so I've got my reference marks made out. Now let's see how this goes together. See if I can get this. It's not a perfect alignment, but there's not really an indexing system. These should go together quite smoothly. We've got this set up here. I'm going to zero it. Whoa, 0.8 millimeters. That is unacceptable, and that's the best I can get that fence. I'm here, why don't I just check for square? There is a good minimum of 1/4 inch gap at the top. Maybe it'll straighten out, but what that says to me, I mean, it's harder to get flatter than particle board, core melamine and MDF melamine. They're all very flat, but that is, you can see how that is. And I know the edges were milled square too, so. That says to me that these holes are not, holes are not exactly perpendicular. Okay, so let's go for a simpler task, and let's join 2 rails together. A 50 millimeter, 8 millimeter dowel pin, so I need to set my depth adjustment to, I'm going to set it to 26. I always like to go a little deeper because it's much harder to re-drill the holes. So that's 26 millimeters. This is softwood, this is pine. Okay. Just to hold my mouth a little differently, this is much closer. You can just barely feel that this part is higher than this, but made a reasonable joint. I don't think this just, I mean, it's flush on the top, on the back and front, probably within the thickness of a sheet of paper, 1/10 of a millimeter. I can catch my fingernail on this piece here. Can catch my fingernail on this piece here, and it seems pretty flush there. But on softwoods, it did reasonable, as long as you hold it accurately. Maybe if I clean that up on a plane, it would come up flush perfectly, which that's, for all practical purposes, that's a reasonable and satisfactory joint. Now comes the test where we join hardwoods. And what I've got here is, I'll just join it this way. I've got a piece of white oak and a piece of ash. Now I will note that it is much more difficult to drill end grain than it is side grain. We'll say that the dust collection actually is pretty decent on this machine. This is not perfectly flat. I see this moving off. You're going to take two flat pieces of wood, join them together, and get a result like that. Let's go back to the softwood one. It's not flat here either. It's just less noticeable because it's not as wide, but there is a gap. 0.6 millimeters, just over this distance, which looks to be about 150 millimeter. There's a 0.6 millimeter gap in there, and I know these two pieces are flat. Okay, I did a little more troubleshooting, and I found out that the fence had slipped. It moved up like this, so that fence had slipped off of 90 degrees, so that may be why I was getting unacceptable joints. It could have been me just not tightening this enough, or it could be that this machine just won't lock. I don't know, so I'm going to do both of these softwood and hardwood joints again, just to see. So I'm going to set this to 90 again, and tighten this as much as I can. Well, I think that was the problem. The fence had slipped on me. But what I noticed here, and these lines on this fence window are very wide. And I may just not be able to position as accurately as I would like, because here I'm proud here instead of this side. It looks fairly significant. It looks like it's at least a ½ millimeter. Let me see. See if I can check that. Turn it on. 0. Yeah, I'm 0.6 millimeters. 0.64 millimeters. Also notice that I still have, this is just not quite, I think that fence might be cocked ever so slightly in relationship to the center line of the bits, which is kind of giving me some, it's like this piece is twisted ever so slightly. Okay, it seems to be tight, but I think that fence may have slipped again because I've got a gap here. Let's see how that looks. Yep, it slipped again. It slips on hardwood, it didn't in the softwood. You do have to push that joiner a whole lot harder, which may be forcing the fence to move. And it seems pretty solid, but it's moved since I last set it. Okay, so I thought I'd do a quick recap of the joinery test results. This thing will drill holes. Unfortunately, I've never been able to accurately and repeatedly and accurately position those holes within the confines of this. I mean, you saw in the earlier video the struggles I had getting this, you know, with binding of the plunge, squareness and flatness of the fence. Now I've discovered that the lines in the fence window cannot be adjusted to where you can zero it. Plus they're fairly wide, so it's hard to align it anyway. The fence, I've had several instances where this has come off of 90 degrees, even tightening this as tight as I could tighten it. So the result is, when we tested the window and tried to adjust that, the closest I could get it was about, looks like about 0.5 millimeters, which is consistent with the offset that I've been seeing in these other joints. If I were to be using this tool to join sheet goods, I wouldn't bother. The Triton documentation tells you, I mean, it's got these indexing pieces here, and I'm not even going to bother making my own jig. They said you can buy a commercially available jig, and the only one that's available is the Methel unit, and I'll show you that in the next video. But it doesn't even mesh up with these sizes. They tell you can make your own, but you better be danged accurate when you do it. I couldn't get this to 90 degrees, and it wouldn't, you know, because of the width of the alignment or the positioning guides on the fence window, it would not. You had some offset in position of the dowel, so you really had to drive that thing home with a hammer. And I think I may have had the fence actually go out of the 90-degree setting on the sheet goods, because I saw this happen again here, where this joint wasn't flat, it was bowed out. Then I did the second joint, and I found that this was cocked, which is consistent with what I've seen with the flatness of the fence, where you can sit there and you can actually rock it ever so slightly, and the further away you get away from center, the more noticeable it becomes. Softwoods, if you want to do a lot of work and sanding after you join that on softwoods, I would, I mean, you can get an acceptable joint, I think, with the Triton. Hardwoods is another story. I mean, that, I think it could be a combination of the bit speed. That's about 17,000 RPM. But again, the offset, the tendency of this thing to drift off, because you're having to push that doweling, the dowler so hard that it's hard to keep the fence set at 90 degrees, even with the knob as tight as you can. Overall final thoughts on this, as far as joinery machines go, I would probably rate this mediocre at best. I mean, I may be able to fix the window, but I have a feeling that that would entail just making a new window and trying to etch it and calibrate it myself. I don't know whether I'll do that or not. Hardwoods, I wouldn't use this machine. Sheet goods, I wouldn't use it. Softwoods, okay. In the next video, I am going to compare this to the Methel Dual Dowel. There's a significant price difference between the two, but the Methel actually does everything it's supposed to do. This one does some of what it's supposed to do, unless, of course, you just want to limit it to drilling 2 holes on 32 millimeter centers. I'm not even going to try this with 10 millimeter or 12 millimeter bits. If I can't get acceptable joints using 8 millimeter dowels, I don't think I'm going to get them with 10 or 12. It's probably going to get worse. So anyway, I thank you for watching. If you do have this tool, I would really love to hear whether you're experiencing some similar situations to it. I think that this Triton Dual Doweler has some, I think it's a combination of design flaws, execution flaws, and poor quality control that caused this to not perform up to at least what I was hoping it would perform to. But hey, you know, it was around $200, so maybe I was, maybe my expectations were too high. So I thank you for watching. Please post any questions or comments, and I appreciate your likes and subscriptions. Have a great day.